Oh, with all that said, speaking of some fun Michigas, Book of Daniel. We're still gonna delve into. Book of Daniel is fun. For those of us who were here last week with it, it was very interesting, especially when we got to the Louis Armstrong connection. That was really a lot of fun when we sort of watched that video, which means we
Yeah.
don't have to read chapter 3 because now we know the story. So that was really funny and really good. So we're going to begin with chapter 4 and see if we can get through chapters 4, 5, and 6. We're going to see more about Daniel's vision, and we're going to see if we can link them to some of the history. Chapter 6 also contains the very famous story, probably one of the most famous stories in Daniel, is Daniel and the lion's den. So we'll see what we get to with it, and we'll sort of see what we have here. The next one's very interesting. It's actually written in first person from Nebuchadnezzar himself, in the Babylonian king. So that's very different, obviously, to have this being written in that first person, with him being the lead. So with that said, we'll pop it up. Okay. I'm just going to go down my list here. So I see Sharon, you are number 1 here on my list. So
Okay. Okay. I forgot how to pronounce this.
Nebuchadnezzar.
That's what I was going to say.
That's a fun name.
I, Nebuchadnezzar, was living serenely in my house, flourishing in my palace. I had a dream that frightened me, and my thoughts in bed and the vision of my mind alarmed me. I gave an order to bring all the wise men of Babylon before me to let me know the meaning of the dream.
So once again, we're sort of going to call back to the Joseph story, right? For a little intertextuality, sort of similar stories where Nebuchadnezzar, like Pharaoh, has a dream and it freaks him out. We saw this also in chapter 2 of Daniel, right? That he has a dream, and it's really important, to gather these wise people together to interpret his dream, because dreams have significance, dreams have power. One of these days, when I teach my Jewish magic class, there's a whole section on dreams and dream interpretation, and that there's a strong current in Jewish mystical thought about the importance and power of dreams, where some people say, Mishigas, and others are really into it as a way of predicting the future, or a way of getting a better understanding of our world, with the idea that God speaks to prophets, through dreams and through dream interpretation. Uh, so again, so he has a dream, very important. You got to figure out what's going on. Sharon, give me one more.
Sure. The magicians, exorcists, Chaldeans, and diviners came, and I related the dream to them, but they could not make its meaning known to me. Finally, Daniel, called Belteshazzar after the name of my God, in whom the spirit of the holy gods was, came to me, and I related the dream to him, saying, Belteshazzar, chief magician, in whom I know the spirit of the holy gods to be, and whom no mystery baffles, tell me the meaning of my dream vision that I have seen.
Indeed. And so Daniel, who we know from earlier in the book, has a gift for interpretation of dreams, and he gets called to interpret this stuff. The other people who came before him couldn't get it done, and so let's get Daniel in here. One would think you'd call him first. That's what I would do. You sort of like you have your best person and call him. He's the one who's shown to do it well before, but he always gets called last for some whatever reason. Nebuchadnezzar reminds us that Daniel is not called Daniel. Daniel is his Jewish name, his Hebrew name, but his Babylonian name is Belteshazzar, which rolls off the tongue. Belteshazzar. And so he's going to ask him what this means, because he knows that Daniel has some skill for this, has some ability. Okay, Bob, you hear me?
In the vision of my mind in bed, I saw a tree of great height in the midst of the earth. The tree grew and became mighty. Its top reached heaven, and it was visible to the ends of the earth. Its foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant. There was food for all on it. Beneath it, the beasts of the field found shade, and the birds of the sky dwelt on its branches. All creatures fed on it.
Very nice. Okay, and so he dreams about a tree. Not very exciting, but he dreams of a tree, right? Couldn't dream of hitting a home run in the World Series. No, he dreams of a tree, and the tree is fine. It's huge. It reaches to the heavens, right? And it's visible from everywhere. Pretty cool tree. Beautiful, abundant, shade for everyone, food for everyone. Good times. Big tree.
Like a tree out of Eden, right? A paradise.
Yeah, no, I think it's actually a nice connection. Sort of like a tree out of Eden, sort of a very lush, very abundant kind of tree where everyone can sort of take part in it. Sort of like the giving tree on steroids. That like it was just good for everybody, but it didn't get smaller and smaller as it gets hacked to pieces. It's a beautiful, abundant tree, good for everybody. Okay, Bob, give me one more.
In a vision in my mind in bed, I looked and saw a holy watcher coming down from heaven. He called loudly and said, "You down the tree, lop off his branches, strip off his foliage, scatter its fruit, that the beasts of the field flee from beneath it and the birds from its branches, but leave the stump, which is the roots in the ground. Its feathers of iron and bronze, let them be drenched by the dew of heaven, and share earth's virtue with the beast. Let his mind be altered from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of a beast. Let 7 seasons pass over him. The sentence is decreed by the watchers. This verdict is commanded by the holy ones, so that all creatures may know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of humanity. And God gives it to whom God wishes, and God set over it even the lowest man."
Okay, so we have him retelling the story, this vision. He sees a holy watcher. As a note here, watcher means angel. It's actually the only time we have in the Bible of an angel being referred to as a watcher. We know it's an angel from pseudepigraphic texts, other ancient texts that talk about apocalypse, talk about angelic beings. So like we have a sense this is an angel just from being able to compare those different texts. So an angel comes down and gives a message, and it's not a great message, for the tree, right? Now it is getting all chopped up and stripped down, and everything is scattering. But leave the stump with its roots in the ground. Why is that important for the tree?
It can regrow.
Continue
It can
to grow.
regrow, exactly right.
Right.
It gives a sign of rebirth, of regeneration. If you pull out the stump and the roots, then that's it, but the stump and the roots remain there. All of a sudden, we get a transition. The stump becomes a hymn. In fetters of iron and bronze, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. And so we have now a hymn here, and so we'll have to take one good guess on who this hymn might be. And then his mind is going to be altered, right? And he's going to be given the mind of a beast. And 7 seasons are going to pass. Why 7?
It's
Why
a
not?
magic number.
Magic number. Indeed, it's exactly right. A magic number. 7s are great. 7s are really seen as cool and as special. Though one can certainly argue that there are a lot of numbers that one can make the argument. But 7, of course, 7 is for Shabbat. We see 7, days of the week. We see 7 in a lot of other contexts in the biblical narrative, where 7 is seen as a very special number. 7 in Hebrew is?
Shiva?
Yeah, you got there. Yeah, Sheva. Yeah, Sheva is 7. Comes from the root sova, which means to be satiated, to be content. Achalta v'savata, we will eat and we will be satisfied. And so 7 is like a perfect number. It's contentness, it's satiation, it's everything being great is 7. What's better than 7?
11.
8, right? 8 is even better. 8 is Shimone. which comes from the root shemen, which means fat and oil. So 7 is good. 7 is you're content. 8, oh, 8, you're overflowing. 8 is just so abundant and so wonderful. 8 is the days of circumcision, right? It's the 8th day, right? And so 8, another very magical, very special number. It's a little Hebrew detour for us while we're doing this. It's always nice to throw in a little extra fun stuff for you guys. So,
Rabbi,
yes.
I'm a little confused. Who is the him he's talking about? Let
Yeah.
him be drenched with the
Oh,
dew
we
of
don't know just yet, but it's
Yeah.
going to be coming. That's what Daniel's going to tell us is who the hymn is going to be. Because right
Okay.
now we don't have a hymn, right? I mean, we don't have a sense of it yet. But if we sort of keep going with it a little bit, so you're going to see that this is going to be this person's deal, right? Is that he's going to have a pretty significant fall, right? So before he is the big tree, the big man on campus, nourishing everybody, sort of powerful and control. Everyone's hanging out under his shade. And trees are usually seen as feminine, right? But here we have sort of a masculine sort of imagery for the tree. Eitz Chaim he, she is a tree of life, or it is a tree of life, referring to Torah. So anyway, here we have the tree being basically torn apart, and then he is going to be basically dragged out and become an animal, right? Become like an animal of the field. And this is what the watchers, this is what the angels say, because, right, to let whoever this person is know that you might be the boss, you might be the king, but there's someone else above that's even more powerful, right? That the Most High is sovereign, and God is the one, right, who gives. God is the one who gives power, bestows power and influence upon people. So God can give it, and God can take it away, right? So that's what we're going to see here. And so with that interpretation, I think it sort of narrows down who this he is going to be here in this story. And so here we go. And most of men. Okay, there we go. Debbie Siegel, you want to read a little bit here? I, King.
Okay. I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had this dream. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its meaning, since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make its meaning known to me. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in you.
Okay, very nice. Good pumping up Daniel. So Daniel better get this right. And so Debbie, give me a little more.
Then Daniel, called Belteshazzar, was perplexed for a while and alarmed by his thoughts. The king addressed him. Let the dream and its meaning not alarm you. Belteshazzar replied, My lord, would that the dream were for your enemy and its meaning for your foe? The tree that you saw grow and became mighty, whose top reached heaven and was visible throughout the earth, whose foliage was beautiful, whose fruit was so abundant that there was food for all in it, beneath which the beasts of the field dwelled, and in those branches the birds of the sky lodge. It is you, O king, you who have grown and become mighty, whose greatness has grown to reach heaven, and whose dominion is to the end of the earth.
Okay, and so you can see Daniel sort of in the beginning here going, I don't know if I want to tell this dream, right? It's like to be the bearer of bad news, because he can sort of interpret it, and he's not thrilled with what he's figuring out. He's like, hey, just tell me, let me know what it is. So Daniel's probably shifting around a little bit in his chair, probably getting a little nervous. Says, hey, look, I hate to break it to you, but this is what we got. You're the tree. Not great, right? So you're the tree, Nebuchadnezzar. You've become great. You've become mighty. Your dominion reaches the ends of the earth. That's the good news. But of course, now the bad news is the angels are coming to smack you around, a little bit, and you're gonna have some trouble. Leah, you want to keep going here?
Sure. The holy watcher whom the king saw descend from heaven and say, hew down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump with its roots in the ground. In fetters of iron and bronze, in the grass of the field, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven and share the lot of the beasts of the field until 7 seasons pass over him. This is its meaning, O king. It is the decree of the Most High which has overtaken my lord the king.
Yeah, God is not amused. Okay, so God is going to give you a little bit of a smack. How'd that happen? Okay. Okay, so yeah, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can keep going.
You will be driven away from men and have your habitation with the beasts of the field. You will be fed grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 seasons will pass over you until you come to know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of man, and God gives it to whom God wishes.
A little rough, okay, right? And so Nebuchadnezzar, you're gonna be driven out, right? And you're gonna be eating the grass and getting rained on, and it's gonna happen for 7 years. So you understand that God is God and you are here, and you are human, and God has control over everything. God's omnipotence must be known. And so, since Nebuchadnezzar's a little arrogant, perhaps, he's going to be brought down a peg or seven. One could think a year of this would have been enough, but Dainu, it was not enough for him. So he gets 7 years of being in the field like an animal. Make sense? Much as it can make sense.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. Linda, you want to pick up here and the meaning?
And the meaning of the command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots is that the kingdom will remain yours from the time you come to know the heaven is sovereign. Therefore, O king, may my advice be acceptable to you. Redeem your sins by beneficence and your iniquities by generosity to the poor, then your serenity may be extended.
Yes, the news ain't great. This is not puppy dogs and ice cream. But with that being said, it's going to be okay. That's why the stump is still there. You're still going to retain control. You're going to be able to regrow and sort of come back. So Daniel says, look, stinks, right? But maybe take some time, reflect a little bit, do some good deeds, volunteer at the soup kitchen once in a while, get out there, get your hands dirty, be nice to people. And then maybe this sentence, this decree that God has made, maybe that'll be put off a little bit. We can sort of like push that back a little longer, as long as maybe we do some good deeds to maybe make up for some of the not so great things that we've done. Okay, makes sense. So Nebuchadnezzar thanks Daniel, I'm sure, says, okay. And then he went off on his merry way with that warning in mind. And so, Linda, you want to keep going here? All this befell?
All this befell King Nebuchadnezzar 12 months later, as he was walking on the roof of the royal palace at Babylon. The king exclaimed, "There is great Babylon, which I have built by my vast power to be a royal residence for the glory of my majesty."
Oh, that's probably not going to help him, one can guess, right? And so there he's going to brag a little bit. He's going to, state how wonderful he is. It's been a year, maybe he forgot a little bit. One can maybe forgive him for slipping, being a little bit braggadocious here. It's a little bit of self-aggrandizement. He's there is Babylon, which I built by my power, blah, 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 blah. And so just at that time, things are going to go sideways for Nebi here. Oh, Nebuch. Okay. Sandy.
Yes. The words were still. That were
Yep.
started. Okay. The words were still on the king's lips when a voice fell from heaven. It has been decreed for you, O King Nebuchadnezzar. The kingdom has passed out of your hands. You are being driven away from men, and your habitation is to be with the beasts of the field. You are to be fed grass like cattle, and 7 seasons will pass over you until you come to know that the Most High is sovereign over the realm of man, and God gives it to whom God wishes.
Oh, yeah. So then he gets the hot coal. He gets the voice from the heavens saying, "Yep, you're done, O king. Now it's going to be time to pay the piper here. Want to keep going, Sandy?
Sure. There and then the sentence was carried out upon Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven away from men, he ate grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like eagles' feathers and his nails like the talons of birds.
Indeed. Okay. And so off he goes to live like an animal. And his body transforms a little bit. If memory serves, and maybe we can Google this later, but I think there was a very famous sort of Renaissance painting of this moment where Nebuchadnezzar sort of comes and grazes with the animals. But that's just a memory that I have flashing in my head. But yeah, his punishment begins, right? His consequence for not recognizing God and being a little bit too much, a little too much hubris for King Nebuch here. And so now it goes back to that first person. When the time passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar. Brahms, you want to give that a read?
When the time had passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted his eyes to heaven, and my reason was restored to me. I blessed the Most High and praised the glorified, the ever-living one, whose dominion is an everlasting dominion, and whose kingdom endures throughout all generations. All the inhabitants of the earth are of no account. God does as God wishes with the host of heaven and with the inhabitants of the earth. There is none to stay God's hand or say to God, what have you done?
Indeed. Okay. And so Nebuchadnezzar finally lifts his eyes up to the heavens after 7 years of this animal experience for him. And then he gets sort of turned back. His reason is restored to him. And he blesses and he prays. And he has this big exclamation of God's power, of God's might. You want to keep going there?
There and then my reason was restored to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the glory of my kingdom. My companions and nobles sought me out, and I was reestablished over my kingdom, and added greatness was given to me. So now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and glorify the ruler of heaven, and all the works are just, and whose ways are right, and who is able to humble those who behave arrogantly.
Indeed, right? So that's exactly right. So he learns a lesson, right? It's a nice story about anava, a story about humility. And as we sort of mentioned last week, a big theme of the book of Daniel is God's control, God's omnipotence, that God has the power to lift up or to bring down. And so here in a very stylized chapter that imagines Nebuchadnezzar as the author of it, basically, as a first-person account, he has to learn a lesson here about pride, and about arrogance, and that he pays this very stiff penalty. And it also, of course, shows us the power of Daniel. Also, as we remember from last time, God-given, this ability for him to be able to interpret dreams. And so we see it cut both ways in this story, that Nebuchadnezzar sort of has to acknowledge God's sovereignty, and Daniel, as the prototypical sort of wise man, understands that already. He understands that all things sort of come from God, including his ability to interpret dreams. And he's able to use that skill set to give Nebuchadnezzar this message and this lesson. Any questions on chapter 4?
I don't know how to do this, but I think I found your painting. But I don't know how
Yeah, there you
to
are.
see it.
Yep,
I
I
don't
think
know how
that's
to
right.
You see the weird head, but I don't know how to make it so it goes bigger. But if you look, it came right up. If you do Nebuchadnezzar, William Blake was the artist.
Yeah,
Kind of creepy.
kind of creepy. That's exactly right.
Creepy.
Kind of creepy. That makes sense to me. Let me see here. I can't bring up my...
Nebuchadnezzar, William Blythe, artist.
Here are some pictures that match.
Oh, wow. Creepy looking.
Yeah. Kind of looks like somebody I dated once. But
Let's see here. Yeah, I was trying to get it sort of up on
Oh, good.
the screen here to not so much avail, but yes, a little gross. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so that is Nebuchadnezzar's lesson here, but we have a little more of Nebi and Daniel's journey together. This one also is a very famous story. So like it's interesting to me how a book that is not commonly read has so many stories that do have some fame to them. And so the fiery furnace, which we saw last week in the song, here we had Nebuchadnezzar becoming an animal, and now we have the writing on the wall, quite literally, where people say, read the writing on the wall. This is where it comes from, the writing on the wall from the book of Daniel. Melissa, you want to pick up here?
King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for his 1,000 nobles, and in the presence of the 1,000 he drank wine. Under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar ordered the gold and silver vessels that his father, Nebuchadnezzar, had taken out of the temple at Jerusalem to be brought so that the king and his nobles, his consorts, and his concubines could drink from them. The golden vessels that had been taken out of the sanctuary of the house of God in Jerusalem were then brought, and the king, his nobles, his consorts, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone.
Indeed. So yes, this is actually after Nebuch here. So this is his son Belshazzar, not to be confused with Daniel Belteshazzar. Just to only be slightly confusing. But
Yeah.
Belshazzar here is Nebuchadnezzar's son, who is now ruling the kingdom. And so it's a fantastic image. You have to sort of picture him and the guys, and his female companions as well, of course, hanging around the palace, nice banquet, having a grand old time. Some good food, some good drink. The Manischewitz is flowing. They're having a really nice night together, and he's a little bit shickered up, as we can say, right? He's had a little bit too much of the good stuff. His heart is merry with wine. And so he then, in that state, decides, you know what? I'm tired of drinking out of the crystal. I'm tired of drinking out of the expensive things I'm already, drinking out of. Let's take those temple ornaments, the temple vessels, out of storage. Let's get them out of the vault, and let's use them to drink out of, to show just how awesome we are, right? And so they're going to bring out the silver cups and the different things, and they're all having a nice party using the temple artifacts, the temple vessels, for a profane purpose, to use them for more of a secular purpose, and then not even secular. I should go back to profane, actually, because they're going to use the wine to help praise, other gods, idols. So they're using the sacramental sort of artifacts from the Mishkan and from the temple to use for idol worship. It's not going to end well. So that is a little bit of foreboding and foreshadowing here. You don't make the best decisions when you're drunk. It's certainly a biblical lesson that happens more than once. Okay, so you just asked Noah. Doesn't end well for him either. Okay, Melissa, you want to keep going?
Just then the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand, so that the king could see the hand as it wrote. The king's face darkened and his thoughts alarmed him. The joints of his loins were loosened and his knees knocked together.
Doesn't sound like fun. Sounds uncomfortable to me. all
Where
I'm
are
saying.
joints in the loins? I mean, that's quite, where in the heck are they talking about?
I think it's more like the hip bone's connected to the thigh bone. I think more of what we're talking about sort of here. If Elizabeth was here, she could help us out a little bit more. But that's what I'm guessing. Sort of maybe the hip sockets, perhaps.
Okay.
And those knees were a knocking, right? Because it's weird to see, this divine hand, or this ephemeral hand, come and sort of write on the wall. And so the king is not amused. He's very worried because it's a very worrying thing. The moving finger has writ, and once it writes, it moves on. So we have the finger here.
The fickle finger.
Yes, the fickle. That's right. The fickle finger of fate. Exactly right. You got it. The fickle finger of fate. So that's there now, and again, he's not amused. So we go back to sort of where we were before. We got to call for the dudes. Got to call for the folks to figure this thing out. Marilyn, you want to read?
Sure. The king called loudly for the exorcists, Chaldeans, and diviners to be wrought. The king addressed the wise men of Babylon. Whoever can read this writing and tell me its meaning shall be clothed in purple and wear a gold chain on his neck, and shall rule as one of three in the kingdom. Then all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known its meaning to the king. King Belshazzar grew exceedingly alarmed, and his face darkened, and his nobles were dismayed.
Okay, so similar, right, to what we saw before. He calls for all these people to figure this out. No one can get it right. He gives a big reward. This idea, if you can tell me, you get to wear purple. No, well, not my color, but still, purple's nice. I guess Elizabeth would like it more, perhaps. Purple, wear a golden chain around your neck, and rule. So you get a pretty big carrot. If you're able to get this thing right. And of course, they come and they can't read it. They can't decipher what's been written or tell the meaning. So of course, the king gets a little more upset. But then, of course, who's going to come save the day? Marilyn is going to keep going here because of the state.
Because of the state of the king and his nobles, the queen came to the banquet hall. The queen spoke up and said, "O king, live forever. Let your thoughts not alarm you or your face darken. There is a man in your kingdom who has the spirit of the holy gods in him. In your father's time, illumination, understanding, and wisdom like that of the gods were to be found in him. And your father, King Nebuchadnezzar, appointed him chief of the magicians, exorcists, Chaldeans, and diviners. Seeing that there is to be found in Daniel, whom the king called Belshazzar, extraordinarily spirit, knowledge, and understanding to interpret dreams, to explain riddles and solve problems. Let Daniel now be called to tell the meaning of the writing."
Okay, there we go. And so the queen comes here. A queen here, by the way, is most likely not Belshazzar's wife, but King Nebuchadnezzar's wife. So Belshazzar's mother. This is probably the queen mother coming in to give some wisdom here. Hence, all the concubines and consorts still being around. Probably the queen wouldn't like that if that was the wife. So here, I think it's probably the queen mother comes in. And you mentioned your father, King Nebuchadnezzar. So she's probably mentioning from the good old days, right, when she and her husband Nebuchadnezzar were ruling. So she has a sense of the history, is what I'm trying to say. She has a sense of what was going on in the past, which is good to have. It's very helpful to have somebody be sort of your parliamentarian, someone who has a sense of some of the history here. And she does. Let's get Daniel over here and have him tell us the meaning of the writing. Daniel's got a pretty good run. He's large and in charge for a long time. Okay, and so now Daniel's going to come. I think we got...
Rabbi,
yes.
why didn't he remember that Daniel did that before? When Mr. Tree?
Oh, because this is the son. So this is Belshazzar. So maybe Belshazzar didn't remember what happened to his dad. One could, hardly forget it, I would think. That if your dad was a wild animal for 7 years, but perhaps he didn't get that note, and so he doesn't really know what's going on. And so yeah, so maybe that's why, and that's why you have to have the queen come and remind him. Hey, I remember back in your dad's time, we had all this trouble, all this mishigas happening. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Okay, Sharon, you want to pick up here?
Okay. Daniel was then brought before the king. The king addressed Daniel. You are Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, whom my father, the king, brought from Judah.
In case he forgot who he was.
Yeah. Right.
You are Daniel. Oh, I am. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder, right?
Yeah.
I have heard about you that you have the spirit of the gods in you, and that illumination, knowledge, and extraordinary wisdom are to be found in you. Now the wise men and exorcists have been brought before me to read this writing and to make known its meaning to me, but they could not tell what it meant. I have heard about you, that you can give interpretations and solve problems. Now, if you can read the writing and make known its meaning to me, you shall be clothed in purple and wear a golden chain on your neck and rule as one of 3 in the kingdom.
Yeah, it's not bad, right? Again, so it gives Daniel the spiel Daniel, don't forget you have all this knowledge and wisdom, and all these folks got me nothing here, got me FS, got me zip here. So maybe help me out here a little bit, and if you do, you get the purple clothes. Purple was very expensive. That wasn't me. I joke, but purple is very, it's a regal color for a reason. It's because it costs a lot of money to produce. That it was not an easy color to figure out. So that's why purple was seen as a very expensive garb for the royalty to wear purple. And the golden chain again, and then to get one of the kingdoms. It's a big give. I mean, this is not nothing here. Daniel might have been fine with a couple bucks and a day off maybe, but here you can get all this cool stuff. This can be yours if the price is right. Okay. Yeah, Sharon, give me one more. Hold on, I went too far. Then Daniel.
Then Daniel said in reply to the king, you may keep your gifts for yourself and give your presents to others, but I will read the writing for the king and make its meaning known to him. O king, the most high God bestowed kingship, grandeur, glory, and majesty upon your father, Nebuchadnezzar. And because of the grandeur that God bestowed upon him, all the peoples and nations of every language trembled in fear of him. He put to death whom he wished, and whom he wished he let live. He raised high whom he wished, and whom he wished he brought low.
Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar was a tough guy, right? He ruled with an iron fist, and he gives a thumbs up and a thumbs down to whoever he wants, and that his will was dominant, right, during that time period. Okay, and so Daniel's going to give him the story here. So Daniel's going to give him the story of his father. We don't tell the story of Papa usually, but we're going to let everyone remember what happened. Bob, you want to read here? But when he grew?
But when he grew haughty and willful, presumptuous, he was deposed from his royal throne, and his glory was removed from him. He was driven away from men, and his mind made like that of a beast, and his habitation was dwelt like asses. He was fed brass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heavens, until he came to know that the Most High God is sovereign over the realm of man, and sets over it whom God wishes.
Yeah, so a little family history. You might not remember, but your dad was an animal in the fields because he didn't do the right thing. That's why he wasn't at your birthday those 7 years. Like you might have missed him. You didn't get the Transformer doll because he was, eating grass. So that's where he was. Your mom said he was somewhere else. That's where he was, though. He was eating the grass in the fields. So that's what happens there. So he gets a little bit of that family history, which I'm sure he loved to hear. Bob, you want to keep going? But you,
Belshazzar, his son, did not humble yourself, although you knew all this. You exalted yourself against the eternal of heaven. and that the vessel of God's temple brought to you. You and your nobles, your consorts, and your concubine drank wine from them and praised the God of silver and gold, bronze and iron, wood and stone, which do not see, hear, or understand. But God, who controls the life breath on every move you make, God you did not glorify. God therefore made the hand appear and caused the writing to be inscribed.
Okay, and so yeah, so Daniel gives him the lowdown here, that because you were arrogant like your father was, and you drank your booze out of these very sacred vessels, this is a problem, and you were worshiping idols. You weren't worshiping God, and God, so you're gonna have a problem here. God is inscribed on your walls. Okay, Debbie.
Yes.
You want to pick up here?
This is the writing that is inscribed. Many, many tekel aparsin.
Easy for you to say.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is the meaning. Mena. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Paris. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians.
Indeed. Okay, and so basically we have this writing here that is, sort of a Hebraic, Aramaic sort of mix in a way, and so we have those words here, mene, tekel, uparsin, that God is going to count you. That's first. God is counting the days of your kingdom, basically. So God is numbering and considering how many days left you have. Tekel, the idea of being weighed, right? And so like your deeds are on a scale, and you're not doing so hot. And Peres from divide, Parsha, right? We have different Torah portions. And so, here we have the division. Your kingdom is going to be divided and given to the folks that are coming after you, the Medes and the Persians.
Rabbi, this many was earlier in Israeli, when the Israels came out, that was also on the wall, that many.
Oh, yeah? Where? Where was that, Bob? I don't have another. Units of monetary weight. A mina was worth 50 or 60 shekels. Yes, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where else that is from. But yeah, so we have this idea of this. He's found wanting and he's in trouble. Deb, you want to finish up here? Then at Belshazzar's command.
Then at Belshazzar's command, they clothed Daniel in purple, placed a golden chain on his neck, and proclaimed that he should rule as one of the three in the kingdom. That very night, Belshazzar, the Chaldean king, was killed, and Darius and Meda received the kingdom, being about 62 years old.
So, it's a little bit of rough go. He gives Daniel the prize, but then he's dead the same night. So a little rough for Belshazzar. I would have kept the purple for myself if that was news like that. But so they gave it to him, man of his word, I guess. And then he goes, he gets the old, and then Darius comes after him. Darius is a historical figure, so he comes afterwards to rule the kingdom. It's Darius 1, Darius 2. I think only 2, but I don't remember.
Rabbi, was it established what part of the kingdom Daniel was king over?
No, that was never established.
I was thinking if it was Judah, where they came from, if that was part of it.
I think they gave him the spot with no oil.
Yeah.
That's my guess. That's my guess. They gave him that part of it. Sort of, the extra humid part of the kingdom, maybe. Didn't get the good stuff. Okay. Chapter 6. Last one of this section of Daniel. So Daniel divided into two halves, 1 through 6, and then 7 to the end. And so it's our sort of last Daniel narrative about the lion's den, which is in itself a very interesting narrative. Leah, you want to pick up here? It pleased Darius.
It pleased Darius to appoint over the kingdom 120 satraps to be in charge of the whole kingdom. Over them were 3 ministers, one of them Daniel, to whom these satraps reported, in order that the king not be troubled. This man Daniel surpassed the other ministers and satraps by virtue of his extraordinary spirit, and the king considered setting him over the whole kingdom. The ministers and satraps looked for some fault in Daniel's conduct in matters of state, but they could find neither fault nor corruption, inasmuch as he was trustworthy, and no negligence or corruption was to be found in him.
So again, we have some allusions here, right? Again, back to the Joseph story, where Joseph is elevated, pretty high to become one of the chief viziers, almost like the vice president of Egypt. And here we have Daniel sort of in a callback to the last chapter to be like one of the 3, right, that are in charge, right? So all these satraps, all these other dudes and ministers report to Daniel and 2 other folks. So the king's not going to be concerned, handle some of the small stuff. That's we could all use that. A couple sort of folks under us to handle some of the smaller things that come on, so the king isn't troubled. Daniel, of course, he's awesome, so everyone's jealous of him. So they're trying to find some kind of problem with Daniel because people are jealous. They're jealous creatures, by their nature, right? They want to find some way to get rid of Daniel because he's in such high regard. And so that's going to be the tension in our story, that he has this promotion, but he, as a Jewish person, one can infer, is going to be seen still as an outsider, and there's going to be some machinations going on in the background about him, and about maybe, that he shouldn't be in such a high position because of his Jewish identity. Leah, you want to keep going? Those men then said?
Those men then said, "We are not going to find any fault with this Daniel unless we find something against him in connection with the laws of his God."
Yeah, he's awesome.
Then these ministers and satraps came thronging into the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the ministers of the kingdom, the prefects, satraps, companions, and governors are in agreement that a royal ban should be issued under sanction of an oath, that whoever shall address a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into a lion's den. So issue the ban, O king, and put it in writing, so that it be unalterable as a law of the Medes and Persians that may not be abrogated." Thereupon King Darius put the ban in writing.
Indeed. So if you remember from a few weeks ago, the Esther story, it's sort of similar language, right? That you have the king create this royal proclamation, and if he writes it down, then it's like it's really, it's set. It can't be abrogated once it's written down. The king's going to put his signet ring, sort of his seal on it, and it's going to be law. And so again, a little bit of political maneuvering. The people sort of know, hey, this Daniel guy, he worships God, not just the king. So this is a way to get him in trouble. And so they're trying to just find a way to get Daniel in some hot water, or, in this case, the lion's den. Worse than hot water, is the lion's den. So they have a little edict here. They have a little edict. They have some stuff here. Linda White, you want to pick up here? Linda, you there?
Yeah.
There you go.
When Daniel learned that it had been put in writing, he went to his house, in whose upper chamber he had windows made facing Jerusalem. And 3 times a day he knelt down, prayed, and made confession to his God, as he had always done. Then those men came thronging in and found Daniel petitioning his God in supplication. They then approached the king and reminded him of the royal ban. "Did you not put in writing a ban that whoever addresses a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into a lion's den?" the king said in reply, the order stands firm as a law of the Medes and Persians that may not be abrogated.
You see, isn't that always the way? He learns about this order, and so he's upset about it, and so he prays about it, and of course he prays to God, and they bust him praying to God, about this edict that says don't pray to God. And so that's, a nice way to get there. And so they see it, and then they tell the king, hey, don't you remember what you said here about people praying to other gods that aren't you, O wise king, live forever? And so the king says, oh, my goodness gracious, what's happening here?
I have a question on that. Up
yeah.
there it says where Daniel knelt before, up there at the top, he
Yep.
knelt down and prayed. I thought that Jews did not kneel before God.
Oh yeah, I mean God's the only one that we can kneel before, right? But you're right in terms of the imagery. Is that when we pray, we usually don't have a lot of kneeling in our prayers. We have more bowing, than we do kneeling. That's exactly right. And then kneeling has a different connotation now. We see that more with Catholic prayer, where they have the kneelers, in the sanctuary, and so. I'd have to look at the Hebrew to see whether what verb they used, how they translated it into knelt. Let me see here. I just have a Bible. I just happen to have a Bible in front of me, just in case.
I just happen to have.
Just happen to have a Bible. In the translation here, this is HarperCollins says, let me see here. Yeah, facing toward Jerusalem, and to get down on his knees 3 times a day. And so they don't have kneel, but they have the same idea to get down on his knees to pray. Here we go. Here you see, that's why HarperCollins, it's always good to have HarperCollins Bible by you. Jews ordinarily stood for public prayer, but during the post-exilic period began the custom of kneeling for private prayer. And so that's where we have the kneeling from. And so that seems to be a tradition in the post-exilic period for private prayer. They give you some cross-referencing here in the Hebrew Bible, a couple from the New Testament, and 3 times. I thought you were coming to me 3 times a day. So it's interesting to me that Daniel prays 3 times a day already. That he has an understanding of Shacharis, Mincha, and Mariv, morning, afternoon, and evening prayers already in this period of time. I think that's pretty interesting that he has that 3 times a day going for him. And so, but it's powerful again to see that Daniel actually prays, that Daniel is, very connected to his spiritual life. And so he kneels, he prays, but he gets busted for it just the same. And now he's in trouble. Linda, you want to give me one more here? Thereupon they said
to the king, Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah, pays no heed to you, O king, or to the ban that you put in writing. 3 times a day he offers his petitions to his God. Upon hearing that, the king was very disturbed, and he set his heart upon saving Daniel, and until the sun set, made every effort to rescue him. Then those men came thronging into the king and said to the king, No, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians that any ban that the king issues under sanction of oath is unalterable.
Unalterable, that's right. And so here the king isn't happy, right? The king sort of learns that Daniel's doing this, but he likes Daniel. Daniel's maybe not his friend, but Daniel is somebody who is a higher up, right, in his administration, his government official, and Daniel knows his stuff. Daniel's a smart cookie. Daniel is helping rule the kingdom, right? So you don't want to lose a dude like this. He's important, but hoisted on his own petard, right? He wrote the thing out, he wrote this law, and now it is making his life miserable. So, and it can't be altered. So
No pardons in those days.
no pardons in those days. Strict laws. Once it was written, it can't be amended. It's a little bit rough. Okay, Sandy, you want to pick up here by the king's order?
By the king's order, Daniel was then brought and thrown into the lion's den. The king spoke to Daniel and said, "Your God, whom you serve so regularly, will deliver you."
It's nice that he's confident.
Huh?
It's nice that he's confident in that, Don't know how great I'd be feeling, but sure. Easy for you to say, King. Okay.
A rod was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his signet and with the signet of his nobles, so that nothing might be altered concerning Daniel. The king then went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and his sleep fled from him. Then, at the first light of dawn, the king arose and rushed to the lion's den.
I like how they emphasize the king. The king had a rough night's sleep. I would think Daniel probably had a rough night's sleep too.
Yeah.
But the king tossed and turned. He was a little stressed. He had a little bit of agita during the night. One can imagine. He had a little agita. Poor Daniel. Okay, Sandy, give me one more.
Sure. As he approached the den, he cried to Daniel in a mournful voice. The king said to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was the God whom you serve so regularly able to deliver you from the lions?" Daniel then talked with the king. "O king, live forever. My God sent an angel who shut the mouths of the lions so that they did not injure me, inasmuch as I found innocent by God, nor have I, O king, done you any injury." The king was very glad and ordered Daniel to be brought up out of the den. Daniel was brought up out of the den, and no injury was found on him, for he had trusted in his God.
It would be nice just to end there, but we won't. We'll finish the paragraph. Keep going.
Gosh, then, by order of the king, those men who had slandered Daniel were brought, and together with their children and wives, were thrown into the lion's den.
Oh,
They had hardly reached the bottom of the den when the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones.
Tough crowd.
Wow.
Tough crowd. And so Daniel gets saved, Mazel Tov all around, Manischewitz for everybody. And it would have been nice to sort of end it there, but we get the little extra paragraph. Oh, those people who sort of wronged Daniel, they need a little bit of a comeuppance as well. And of course, their wives and children also get thrown into the lion's den. And that's the end of them.
Well, but the lesson is, so don't bear false witness. I think it's an important paragraph or important ending.
Yeah. Well, no, look, it is definitely, it underscores the point. You have that right. It underscores the point. Is that don't do bad things, or else bad stuff's going to happen to you, and our actions do affect other people, right? And so one can see the point they're trying to make. Still a little gross, but but one understands the point. Definitely true. Okay. And then we just have this last little paragraph here about Darius, basically similar to what we saw with King Nebuchadnezzar, right? That he writes to everybody, good wishes to everyone, may your well-being abound. All men must tremble in fear before the God of Daniel, for God is the living God who endures forever, etc., etc., etc. Delivers and saves, signs and wonders. And then Daniel, of course, did great, Mazel Tov all around, during the time of Darius, and then Cyrus the Persian. So, like the Nebuchadnezzar chapters, that you have a foreign king who is extolling the virtues of the God of Israel, which is, as I mentioned, I think last week, a little bit of Jewish wish fulfillment. They really sort of wanted this to be the case, so they have it in the story. That's how awesome Daniel is that he gets the foreign, the pagan sort of rulers to not only acknowledge God, but everyone's going to acknowledge God, which is a vision, of course, as we're going to see next week. A bit of the end times, right? A bit of the a Jewish idea of the apocalypse, that all are going to come to God's holy mountain, and we're all going to praise God there. And it's going to be a universally acknowledged fact by Yom Hahu, on that day, God's name will be one, and God's kingdom will be everlasting, right? So that is Daniel, at least the first 6 chapters. And so we got through exactly what we wanted to do. 5 minutes over, but that's okay. I'm glad we had the opportunity to get through that, because then we get into the real, got to get a glass of wine to make sense of some of this stuff next week. We're gonna have a lot of more visions and beasts and creatures and all the other good stuff that we're gonna see in Daniel's apocalyptic visions. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, parables, metaphors, similes, folk songs?
Were the mystics involved in writing this at all, or do you think?
Oh yeah. I mean, what we would say is that this is an example of literature that was apocalyptic, and because mystics were very involved and very interested in works that talked about the end times, then it's going to be a book that is important to the mystical tradition that eventually becomes Kabbalah. But certainly in that esoteric, Jewish mystical experience that has its roots, even during that time, of Daniel, they're gonna to utilize literature like that. And Daniel is one of the few that is biblical, that is there. A lot of the other books are post-biblical, or were not included in the canon that the mystics going to gravitate towards. It's like the Book of Enoch, for example, and books of that nature. So maybe one day we'll do Enoch together. That would be a long run. Enoch's a long book, but it's very interesting and mind bending. So, okay, my friends, a good evening of study. Great seeing you on Zoom. Yeah, no, I was going to mention that we're going to stay online sort of a bit more, but as God willing, the numbers will get even better to the point where we can maybe offer this as a hybrid. I don't know if there's going to be as much interest in that, but eventually, yeah, we might be reopening this to be an in-person experience at some point. But right now, we're going to stick to Zoom for a little longer.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
night.
Have a good night.
Next week,
Bye.
not sooner.
Bye-bye.
Bye.